Right, so I've got some facing bits here. Now I want you to use your imagination a little bit, because you've got to imagine that this is a garment that's gone all the way around, and therefore this piece of facing is also connected to this piece of facing. But to conserve fabric, I've obviously chopped it off for this example. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to mark the seam allowance on the edges of our facings. So this will be sewn on the top of the garment, like so. And you can absolutely, if you wanted to, stitch this on and then stitch this up on the seam allowance, just as we did with the standard zip. But I'm going to just take it up a level because this looks very, very professional. So what we're going to do is we've marked the seam allowance on the edges, and we're going to cut it probably to about 5mm. So we're taking off a good centimetre or 3/8, like so. So we're shortening our facing, deliberately shortening our facing. Okay, smashing. Now what we're going to do is we're going to measure the seam allowance down on the fabric. I'll do the same over here, and this should be just sitting above the stopper if we've sewn our zips in properly. And I'm going to place a snip down to that seam allowance mark, and I'm cutting on the centre back or the side seam, depending on the positioning of this. I'm snipping down that seam allowance to meet this seam allowance, so it's the cross section we are working with. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to ignore this side initially. Let's make sure I get the right piece. There we go. So this is currently sitting like that, but we're actually going to pull this up to the raw edge. Okay, and I'm going to place a pin in here. And I'm going to run a stitch down, and I'm going to finish there. And I'm going to use a standard stitch length, and I'm going to make sure that that's all in position. So I'll go and do that, and then I'll show you what to do next. Right, so that's now been stitched in. Now what I'm going to do is we're going to start looking at then stitching this these raw edges along the top of the garment, but I want to almost pull the seam allowance back on itself, which is where this little snip is going to really help. And hopefully you'll be able to see that where I have trimmed down this bit and stitched it on, that now has aligned or realigned itself up. Okay, so I'm going to place a few pins in, and I'm going to stitch this along the top at the 3/8 seam allowance, and then I'll turn it out and I'll show you just how beautiful this finish is. Okay, so I've stitched that across, and I'm now just going to trim it all off. So I'm going to take this corner out of the equation, and then I will just layer the seams as I would normally to reduce the bulk in the facing or the waistband. Okay, and then when you turn this through, what you'll be able to see, if I just get a pin, pull this out, what you should be able to see It's the most beautiful finish to your stitching line. That's just a bit stuck there, so let me just wiggle that out. There we go. So that is sitting beautifully flat. You've got a really lovely edge to that, and then this is sitting absolutely square. It's such a professional finish. It's absolutely beautiful, and it looks fantastic on lining and facings. It's just wonderful. So there we go. That's how you would finish it off. It does tend to lend itself better to a concealed zip, simply because there is no visible stitching line on the actual tape itself. But there we go. That's how you finish off a concealed zip professionally.